Just to put it bluntly, caucus are usually a bunch of chocolate soldiers. They melt as soon as you turn up the heat.
Things just keep getting worse for Justin Trudeau. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. My name's David, and today's top stories, we've got 4 Liberal MPs stepping down at the same time. This comes just before the caucus meeting that's happening next Wednesday for the Liberals. This is not good. We've got coverage from 3 different sources on this, as well as a few clips here. So we'll start off with some rapid fire clips and then move into the main story here. First off, we got this. Almost 2,000 people came out to Conservative BC, packed in Surrey here. The race is really tight, so we're going to have to see what happens here. We've got one more day of campaigning and then final voting on Saturday. That is a packed house, though. We also got this from Table Salt. It says breaking anti-immigration sentiment smashes another record in Canada. So we've got 65% of Canadians stating they feel immigration levels are too high, up from 35% in 2019. So we can see here, yeah, I mean, the immigration, way too much immigration. It's destroying our country. We need to go back to what we used to have after we fix the housing crisis, which basically means we need to drop it down to 0 for the next 5 years and then go back to Harper levels of immigration. Next up, we got this. Times are tough in Canada. Would you believe this? These people are returning a barbecue. That is charred. Absolutely charred. Testing out Costco's return policy there. I don't know. Let us know how it goes. I saw a half-eaten chicken get returned. I also saw a dried up dead plant get returned. Crazy part is they probably took it back, no questions asked. Yeah, Costco. They probably did. Next up, we got this. It says Stats Canada officially records severe food insecurity in Canada doubling between 2020 and 2022. So you can see here, basically what we're looking at is these numbers here from here up to here. Yeah, food insecurity. There's a lot of people going to food banks. It's really sad. This is all because of Justin Trudeau. Next thing, they'll change the definition of severe. Yeah, that's what they would do. Next up, we got this one posted by Kirk. It says, can someone explain to me what does Parks Canada moving away from colonial practices means? So Stephen Guilbeault here, he's a nut job. It says, with the signing of Indigenous Stewardship Framework, Parks Canada is moving away from colonial practices. Instead, we're embracing Indigenous knowledge, their role as stewards of the land, and helping pave a better path forward for future generations. What exactly are the colonial practices are we doing with the parks? Exactly. Like Kirk said here, this is absolutely stupid. A stupid post by Stephen Guilbeault. It's an easier way of saying park fees will be going up, but that's probably true. I can hardly wait to get back to common sense, no progressive identity politics government. Next up, we got a SOGI book, that's Sexual Orientation Gender Identity book, in a kindergarten library in South Surrey. You're not going to believe this.
K to 3, you got the basics, bigender, cisgender, demigender, what the fuck? Androgender, fluid, orgogender.
I mean, these would make great names for Dungeons and Dragons characters.
Intersex. Jerks. What is that one? I can't even pronounce that.
That's probably a final boss, some sort of Libragender. This is so dumb.
Pangender. Gender questioning, gender assignment, subgender, yes, transgender. Well, I don't even know what that one is.
Whoa, Vengender. I haven't seen half of these before.
It is just...
Zerl. Yin Yang Ren. We got the Zeki's here. This is quite possibly one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. Oh my god, I had no idea here were so many new words. These same people will complain about misinformation. Yeah, well, but if you're looking for a good Dungeons and Dragons hero or enemy name... In tonight's top story, we've got 4 of Justin Trudeau's cabinet ministers stepping down all at the same time. This is not a good look. So here's a quick shot of them, but we'll get into them here. So we've got Philomena Tassa, who's responsible for a Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. We've got National Revenue Minister Marie-Claude Bibeau. We've got Sports Minister Carla Caltro and Northern Affairs Minister Dan Vandal. So you can see them here. There's Tassie, there's Bibeau, Qualtro, and Dan Vandal. So jumping over to CTV, they did a piece on this.
Yeah, Todd. So we can confirm that there are 4 more cabinet ministers who will not be running for re-election. As you noted, Minister Tassie has issued a statement already indicating that her decision was for personal family reasons, saying she still has support for the Prime Minister.
Bull crap, we all know it.
Saying it was a bittersweet decision, but she won't be running again. Now, Todd, we are awaiting statements from the other three to get more of a sense of their rationale or their decision behind why they are not going to be running for re-election. But as you noted, this is going to open up the need for a cabinet shuffle. The Prime Minister is not going to keep folks who are not running again in his front bench. So there is going to be a bigger shuffle than we've seen recently. This is not an one in, one out. And so this is going to be key for the Prime Minister. As you noted, the polling numbers have not improved at all for the Liberals for quite some time. Cabinet shuffles, other resets, things they've tried to do have not stuck. And so this is going to be a chance for the Prime Minister to try to set what will likely be his pre-election cabinet roster and try to come forward with some bigger vision or sense. And that is what we've heard from Liberal MPs, is they're not sure where things are going. They're not sure where the Liberals are going to pitch themselves to Canadians in the next election. So while it's not good news to lose cabinet ministers, it does kind of open up that chance for him to bring some other people into the fold and use this as an opportunity to frame a new narrative.
You know, some critics are going to say this is like trying to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, switching around ministers and whatnot. The ship's going down. They have been trying everything to try and re-engage with Canadians. Doesn't seem to be working if you look at the polls anyway. And of course, there are Liberal MPs who are becoming more vocal about this. Talk to me a little bit about, the next couple of weeks, the implications for Justin Trudeau.
Absolutely. So what we can say is that next Wednesday's Liberal caucus meeting on Parliament Hill is definitely going to be a big day for the party. We have heard that there is a group of MPs working behind the scenes on plans to present to the Prime Minister directly their request for him to consider stepping down before the next election for the betterment of the party. Now, the Prime Minister continues to say that he will be the one leading them into the next election. So we'll see whether that call is something that has him at least go back and say, I'm going to think about this more. But certainly this is the most direct push from members of his inner circle, his Liberal caucus, for him to consider the next steps, because as you noted, they have tried a bunch of efforts and nothing really seems to be shaking things. But when you're talking there, Todd, about kind of reshuffling deck chairs, I was looking at the regional breakdown across the country, and the Prime Minister, over successive cabinet shuffles, has made an effort to maintain both regional representation and gender parity. And with Minister Carla Qualtrough announcing she won't be running again, the Prime Minister will not have a single female cabinet minister west of Ontario, and very limited options for others he could bring in. So that is going to be something the Prime Minister is going to have to take away, work with his team to try to figure out how do we kind of keep up these promises of representing the whole country when you don't have as many seats in certain areas, and how to make sure that he is maintaining what seems to be a priority for him is that gender parity.
Yeah.
Now, we want to make sure we're not assuming people's gender. There might be some demi-googies over there, or Ziki Tazikis. What were them? Zenny gender and Baba Ganoush gender? I can't remember the names.
He may have his hands full elsewhere. We'll see how that plays out.
So Trudeau's going to rearrange his ship here, but it's still sinking. That's what's going on here. It doesn't matter who they rearrange. It doesn't matter if they bring in Ronald McDonald. They're not going to save this party. It's done. Even the Hamburglar couldn't save the Liberal Party right now. How many cabinet shuffles is he going to do in a year? The definition of insanity is shuffling the same old used up deck over and over and expect it becomes a new deck. Placing gross incompetence with more gross incompetence sounds like a winner. If incompetence were a party.
Joining me now is political analyst Laurie Turnbull. And Laurie, since the beginning of this latest sitting of Parliament, it seems like there's no dull day in Ottawa. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, that's definitely true. There are no dull moments. It just seems like hit after hit keeps coming. This isn't even a sitting week, which is the kind of weird part about it, right? Like usually these weeks are kind of quiet. You don't hear very much from caucus. They're home in their ridings, but this has been super eventful in that while the Prime Minister has been away last week and now into this week, there's been organizing around, people talking about his future, caucus members apparently signing a secret document to create some solidarity around a push for him to leave. And so it should be really interesting on Monday when they all come back.
Yeah, you mentioned hit after hit for the Prime Minister. Ultimately, what are the implications for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? Of course, not just him, but the federal Liberals have been trailing big time in the polling, now losing for more ministers.
Right. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily surprising on one hand when people who have been in office for 10 years say, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, I've come to the end of my rope and I'm not going to reoffer. Right. They're not necessarily coming out and saying, look, I don't want to run with Justin Trudeau and I have a problem with the leader. They're not saying that. They're saying we're not going to continue, which sure, you know, we'll kind of give him one more thing to deal with. Right. Even if it's not about him, there's still this sense that, you know, the party is down in the polls. His personal popularity is extremely problematic. And so then you add to it the fact that core members of his team, people who are extremely loyal to him in cabinet, are deciding not to come back. And this is on top of, you know, former Minister O'Regan, former Minister Rodriguez, both of whom left, you know, saying for their own reasons, for other reasons, not because of the leader, but still it creates this kind of additional thing.
So Rodriguez got a new job opportunity being the Liberal leader, provincial of Quebec. Obviously, he's going to jump ship from this sinking ship and take that job before this one runs out. I don't know if he took a bit of a pay cut to do that, but he's more likely to be riding on to the next couple of years doing that versus losing his job soon or next year. That's a no-brainer for Rodriguez to do that. Seamus O'Regan, that's a bit of a question mark. I mean, that's one of Trudeau's buddies that he hired on, one of his wedding buddies. Maybe he got a whiff of Trudeau's crap and it was too much for him. Who knows?
For Trudeau to respond to in a sense that things are not looking great for him and for his party.
And so now the next thing we're watching for is the shuffling of the cabinet. How important could this be for the Prime Minister in terms of setting himself and setting the cabinet up for a next election, which could really be any time, but for the Liberals, likely in the spring, maybe, of course, potentially for the fall. But with the pressure that has been on Ottawa from the opposition parties, they could be ready anytime for an election.
Sure. I mean, the Liberals are in a minority government situation. They used to have a deal with the NDP that basically inoculated them from concerns around whether they'd lose confidence in the House, but now that's been removed. And so they are more vulnerable now than they were before. That said, all three parties would have to cooperate on the opposition side in order to defeat the government. And that, you know, isn't necessarily going to happen anytime soon.
No, that's not going to happen. I mean, look what Jagmeet said in the press conference yesterday. He's got Trudeau's back all the way until, well, February, as I said. He's got $2.2 million on the line. Trudeau's not going anywhere unless RCMP investigations prove he needs to be going to jail, which he does.
I'll have to have the reasons for wanting to do it. And the government itself might decide, you know, Trudeau might decide, you know, especially given the fact that he's got these additional problems. He's got members of caucus organizing against him. He's got cabinet ministers saying they're not going to come back. He may decide at some point that he'd rather take his chances and go to election and just deal with it rather than try to keep this particular train on the track, because it just seems harder and harder to do that. In terms of,
he'd never do that. He's not going to just go to election. He knows his instant loss. The guy's making $1,117 a day. He's just going to keep squeaking this out. He's making $405,000 a year. He's going to keep running this as far as he possibly can to squeeze out that money, not just for that cash, because to him, that's probably chump change, or it's not that much. It's what he's doing on the back end that we don't see. Remember, this is a guy with a real estate development company who sells lumber off of his land. How many buildings is the guy developing? Does he sell houses or townhouses, condos, big towers? I don't know. But think, if Sadie had 5 big towers in the works right now for his real estate development company, and all of those units are coming up soon, and there's 300 units per tower, he wants those real estate prices to be sky high when he goes to sell them. He doesn't want Poilievre getting in power. He wants to keep bringing in 1.5 million people per year to keep those prices jacked nice and high so he can make a ton of money off of all of our suffering. Something fishy is going on with Trudeau, but that $400,000 salary is just icing on the cake for whatever he's doing in the back end, and I think it has something to do with his real estate development company.
A cabinet shuffle. He tried to do that in 2023 when he had a massive shuffle in terms of bringing people in, getting people out, shuffling the deck chairs of the people who remained, and it didn't really help him. It didn't really change anything in terms of his electoral fortunes. It seems like, you know, if Sean Casey is right, what constituents are saying is we don't want to vote for Trudeau. And so if that's the case, that a cabinet shuffle is not going to help him unless it involves him.
And jumping over to CTV here, they also have a panel on this. But before we do that, let's just think about this for a second. So if Trudeau has just say had one tower that he was selling at 300 units in it, and each unit, just say they're $500,000 each, say he's making $200,000 off of each unit, that's $60 million of profit. Now, say it's only $100,000 of profit on each unit. That's $30 million profit. Doesn't matter what it is. But if he cuts the immigration rate, or Poilievre gets into power and cuts the immigration rate, and the housing prices drop by 30%, that's $60 million of profit is now only $40 million of profit. It's a loss of $20 million. This is big business, and think that's just one tower. So if he's making $60 million on one tower and he has 3 or 4 towers, you can see where the guy's incentives lie, having a real estate development company. Now, I don't know, is he selling to big towers? Or is he building houses, condos? Is it just land? Does he own just a bunch of land? Does he rent it out? I don't know. There's no information on this, but this really needs to be public knowledge, because this most likely, in my opinion, is driving all of his decisions for what he's doing with Canada, is his own profit. The money he is making, how the guy's getting rich. Okay, jumping over here to CTV, we've got Philomena Tassi. This is one of the people stepping down.
Today's an emotional day, but I believe now in my heart of hearts that this is the right decision. And so that's what makes it a little bit easier. I had confidence in the Prime Minister in 2015, and I have confidence in him today. This decision is all about me being closer to my family.
Yeah, right.
Outgoing Minister Philomena Tassi just moments ago here on the show detailing her decision not to seek re-election. She's one of 4 ministers to drop the news this morning, just days ahead of an organized caucus challenge of the Prime Minister's leadership of the Liberal Party. Today's 4 takes the tally of ministers to recently bow out of the next election up to 6. How much of a hit is this to the Prime Minister himself and his front bench? Joining me to talk about that, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant is here. He's the CEO of Space Canada now. Corey Tonight was Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as is Mariko Walsh. She's a senior political reporter with the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Brian, I'll start with you. Do you think there's any way the Prime Minister can spin this as not a hit, another hit to his leadership, or is this, in your view, a hit to his leadership?
It's definitely a hit in the sense that it's repeating a story that's incredibly not helpful for the Liberals at this moment. It's also sort of aggravating it. There's no question about that as well. It seems like so far the ministers have certainly toed the line and said that they're still supportive of the Prime Minister, even if they are resigning. So that's helpful. But look at us right now and look at the next few days. People are going to talk about the potential of the caucus meeting going awry next week. Now, the interesting part, one little opportunity perhaps for Trudeau and his team is to actually delay a cabinet shuffle for a while. It may be a way in which you have a calmer caucus meeting on Wednesday, because maybe there's some that maybe all, or maybe at least a handful, and maybe the more important ones are thinking to themselves, well, I'm not going to go to the mic. I'm not going to be as aggressive as I was planning, because you never know. Maybe I am about to be named a cabinet. So in a way, it could be some little bit of a blessing in disguise. Now, that said, I want to be very clear. The minute that they do the shuffle, everybody that maybe was a little calmer because of that possibility, and they see they're not asked to be in cabinet, well, that dissipates, and they're probably just as upset, maybe even more upset.
That guy's spot on. These little crumb snatchers are going to be waiting around to see if they get moved up, and as soon as they don't, they're going to snap right at Trudeau. You'll see more of them coming out against him.
Marika, you're having a lot of conversations, as I am, with people who are hoping to convey that message to the Prime Minister. Is it your impression that at this point the possibility of getting into cabinet will dissuade them? My impression is that it would not, only because they feel like they're going to lose their seats.
Yeah, I think certainly I heard from some Liberals today saying, oh, we're being managed. Like, this is coming out just before this caucus meeting to dangle this carrot. I'm not sure if it was a sanctioned leak. Louis Blouin is a very good reporter who had it first. So who knows?
It's definitely coordinated. They did it all at once. Minister
Exactly.
Tassi essentially said that very blatantly.
Yeah,
she got a call last night. It's okay to release your statement today. Yeah.
Yeah, either way, it ended up being coordinated, and there is that very short-term payoff that Brian talks about. But as we saw with the shuffle last summer, there's a lot of anger that came from the people who weren't. So I'm not sure it will be the long-term payoff the Prime Minister's hoping for. I think this is just another thing to manage and figure out, and it's the third shuffle in 4 months. So there's not a sense of sort of an overarching strategy or coordination within the PMO of dealing with everything at once and then moving on.
Yeah. Corey, your thoughts on kind of what it looks like, I guess, from the outside, that you've got all this reporting about the possibility of caucus pushing you out. Sean Casey going on the record this week, a sitting MP planning to run in the next election, saying you should leave. And now 4 ministers saying, OK, of course, they're going to say for their own reasons, most of them, but that they are just choosing not to seek re-election either. Like, what is the bigger picture?
I think the bigger picture is that people are quietly walking away. And for there seems to be a small but growing number of MPs that are willing to confront the Prime Minister directly on his leadership. But I think there's a much larger group of people who will just quietly fade into the background here. And I think that's sort of what you're seeing. Now, I don't think these particular ministers leaving have a huge amount of national importance. People would have to know who they are to care that they're leaving. And I don't think very many Canadians, even folks like myself who follow politics pretty closely, have anything but passing familiarity of who the four who left today are. But some of the others who have left, particularly Rodriguez and Seamus O'Regan, are big names, and and potential leaders and past leaders of importance within the Liberal Party as a whole. So,
well, he is right. Does anyone know these ministers? No. As he said in passing, they're gone. Nobody knows who they are, but Trudeau doesn't have any big names that people are really rallying around. Sean Fraser, the guy who destroyed housing, Randy Balsanote, the guy who self-served his PPE company, Stephen Guilbeault, the guy who burned down Jasper. They're all a bunch of losers. There's no heavy-hitting, awesome people there. They're just all garbage.
Look, I think it's bad news. I think you can expect to see more bad news like this. I was chuckling at Brian's point because I think he's bang on. Nothing brings caucus in alignment like the potential of a shuffle. Everyone gets on their best behavior. But I think he's also right that as soon as, and Marika as well, that as soon as that is gone, anyone who wasn't selected becomes even more grumpy than they were before. Yep. I've never seen a caucus member who isn't in cabinet who doesn't think that the government as a whole would be doing so much better if only they were named to cabinet. It's a universal.
Tom, your thoughts on sort of the bigger picture here, the impression that this leaves. I take Corey's point about not everyone knowing, or being super familiar with who these individuals are, but they had been around for a long time, and it comes it's the timing of it, I think, that certainly maybe amplifies the impact.
Yeah, and to Marika's point, I couldn't agree more. This is clearly orchestrated, and it's orchestrated to put a little bit more chaff into the air to try to distract the radar. And since the weekend, I'm not saying that what happened between Canada and India didn't have to happen or that India didn't do anything wrong. But of course, the timing of that announcement on the Monday of a long weekend was clearly intended to distract.
I mean, it was on Thanksgiving, for crying out loud. Come on.
The outburst yesterday about Poilievre and why doesn't he come and look at the secret documents? I want to be able to warn and arm the Conservatives. That's called going over the top. And now this. So you do have a coordinated effort to take out the bad news. But as everyone has just said very correctly, I've been a party leader. I can talk to that. Yes, of course. If you say that there's going to be some important assignments going out and you've got some people leaving, you're going to try to get people on their best behavior. I don't think it's going to change a thing. I think that there are 20 or 25 people who had the guts to sign a piece of paper. They'll be going to the microphones, to use the term, which is the correct one, in a caucus. And the other thing, of course, that we're seeing is that somebody of the caliber of Sean Casey, who for reasons that have never been totally clear, was left out of caucus. Has left out of cabinet. He's still in caucus. But, this guy went to the microphones himself this week publicly, called for his leader to step down. And by the way, did it in perfect French. People tended not to know that this MP from Prince Edward Island speaks absolutely fluent French and was on French and English TV saying, look, his time's up. So I think that all of that is a critical mass of information that Trudeau and the people around him should be processing in the right way. Are they oblivious to it? I'm not convinced they're oblivious to it. I think that they know that the writing's on the wall, but Trudeau has a couple of options. The main one, of course, is prorogation. A lot of people have talked about that. The other one, I know it sounds over the top, but it's worth mentioning that he has the absolute right constitutionally to walk across the lawn from Rideau Cottage, where he is, to Rideau Hall, where Mary Simon is, and ask for an election writ. I don't think he'd do that. That would be suicidal right now, and there's nothing in place. But it's his nuclear option, to put it that way.
There's no way he's going to prorogate. That's what's going to happen here. Just give it a week or two. I mean, the fact that the government's not operating, they should be going to jail. They shouldn't be talking about shuffling their cabinet. They can shuffle whatever chairs they want to sit in the local jail, but Trudeau doesn't care about anything but himself. And as I said, probably propping up those real estate prices from his real estate development company. Who knows? Maybe he's got something completely different going on. But clearly he doesn't want to step down, and there's a reason for it. And maybe it's just to brew in the power that he can walk around like he's the Sultan, the King of Canada. He's got his entourage of RCMP, Mr. Greasy Cheese Bucket Smile guy. Ooh, ladies. I don't know. You can't really know a guy like that. He's just an absolute buffoon who serves his own interest. What is his own interest? Who knows?
Brian, the term that Tom used, critical mass. Do you think there is critical mass at this point on the question of his leadership?
Well, it depends how you kind of frame that in the sense, is there critical mass of those that will put their name to a letter or to the cause? I'm not sure. I think if there's 20, that's probably potentially manageable. If it's getting up to 30, 40, it's starting to get a little more complicated. And of course, a bit to Corey's point too, I mean, who are the personalities that are behind it as well? Are they people that may have sort of more oomph nationally or in certain regions? So I think there's a bit of a set of factors that would need to be known. Now, I want to point to the fact that, I mean, Blaine Higgs is in the middle of the at the end of the New Brunswick election campaign. A few months ago, a lot of people thought he would no longer be the leader. And to Tom's point, one of the things, to paraphrase Higgs, he basically said, if they keep this up, I'm going to go and call an election, and I'm going to be the leader in the campaign. So he's running that campaign now, and not a lot of people would have thought that would have been the case. And I just want to add, by the way, I thought Corey's point was pretty good when I've had the chance to form a cabinet, and I can tell you that you think you're going to call everybody and they're going to be so happy when they're about to be asked to serve in cabinet, and you have the impression that they thought that was going to be the case, and then you start to think to yourself, all the people that are at home not getting a call from you that night that probably thought that was going to be the case, so that they were going to get one. So that always worries you as a leader, and I couldn't agree more, and I'm just putting emphasis. I do think in the long term, it will be a bit of a challenge and maybe a big challenge for those that don't get the call in this next cabinet shuffle. They probably will be all that much more irritated. Whether they say it publicly or not will be the question.
Marika, I know you talk to people all the time who are, involved in discussions around the Prime Minister's future. What is your sense about their sense of what critical mass would be?
I think that's the million-dollar question. I don't think there is agreement from Liberals in the backbench. They think 20 is a big number, and I think that is too. If that comes public, that is a sizable chunk of your backbench when you factor out parliamentary secretaries, cabinet ministers who are just not going to be the ones. It's a third of your backbench. And when you factor in all the people not running already, it's even more, right? So who is behind Trudeau when he's at the next general election, if they are saying this? From our reporting, some people close to the Prime Minister think that it will only be a handful that comes forward and that will be manageable. They were very skeptical about our number that we reported, that it would be 20 MPs as a minimum coming forward. Of course, this is all based on what we know now. There's a lot of uncertainty in this, a lot of sort of dissent or discussion still among the people who are coordinating or trying to be part of this revolt as to how they go forward. But another person close to the Prime Minister said they really actually don't know what to expect in terms of the numbers. The Prime Minister, despite what he said publicly on Monday, that he's just making calls about India, he has been making calls one-on-one to MPs to test the waters and see where things are at. But the strategy right now from the Prime Minister's office does seem to be about day by day and getting through the day and not sort of, the bigger picture.
Do you think the Prime Minister's time at the helm of the Liberal Party, Corey, is limited?
I think it's limited, and it's going to come to an end. It's just a matter of how. Certainly, if he goes into an election campaign, it's going to be over. There's, I think, as close to a 0% chance of him being reelected as you can come to in this business. So it's going to come to an end. It's just how, whether it's on his own terms by recognizing what is obvious to anyone who can read a poll, that Canadians are done with them. And I think, the question for members of caucus that they're looking at, and just to put it bluntly, caucus are usually a bunch of chocolate soldiers. They melt as soon as you turn up the heat. And the fact that they even have 20 of them talking about doing this is a big number. And, it only took a dozen to end the political career of Stockwell Day. It took 25 to end Margaret Thatcher's career. So I think it's a substantial number, but they're looking at their own survival right now. And the reality is, I think for those in Atlantic Canada, probably none of them are coming back, like zero. So, it's more of an existential question for them. They know he's gone one way or another, and they're starting to think about whether or not they want to be gone too. And I think the Liberal Party writ large has to start thinking about whether, what this means for the party, for the institution of the Liberal Party, if they allow such an unpopular leader and prime minister lead them into the next election campaign.
This is so on point. The whole chocolate soldier thing melt when the heat gets turned up. That's so good. It's too late for all these MPs, though. It doesn't matter, Atlantic Canada or wherever. Trudeau has ruined the brand. Sure, he's the guy who came back and he revitalized it. Well, he ruined it too. And he's flushing out all these jobs over to the Conservatives now. A few for the Bloc as well in Quebec. The Liberals are losing their jobs.
Last word to you, Tom.
Actually, I'll go back to an interview you had with Anthony Housefather, a Montreal area MP, on Tuesday. And I was gobsmacked. I was waiting to come onto a panel after that, and I got to see the whole thing as it rolled out. And I was amazed because Housefather is that quintessential, loyal, partisan Liberal. All his values, his whole career. He's that guy. And he refused to say whether or not he supported Trudeau. He said, well, I'll always support the person who's leader, but then again, we have to have a discussion about who the leader should be in the next campaign. So when you get stuff like that from a person like Anthony Housefather, there is definitely something difficult that's going to be there for Mr. Trudeau when he comes to caucus next week. And I think I agree with Marika. If it's anywhere near 20, that's a huge number, and that's very hard to manage. You can't talk your way beyond 20 people who are saying, boss, it's really time for you to leave.
I noticed that too when Housefather was saying that it just looked very much like, it looked like he's putting on a face for the Liberals, but he doesn't support Trudeau anymore. Rats jumping ship. Rats running away. Look at these comments. It's time to shuffle this government out of power. There's never been a clearer case. We don't want you here anymore. Yet this narcissist is sticking around like he's been voted prom queen. Rearranging chairs on the Titanic. On 388 Canada, which is the polling aggregate website, says all four are going to lose. That's why they're quitting. There we have it. Justin Trudeau's caucus is falling apart. There's going to be a meltdown next week, and Justin Trudeau will have to make a decision. It's either call an election, go to jail, or prorogue the government. That's basically his only options. We all know it's going to be number 3. How long will Justin Trudeau prorogue the government for?